Good evening and welcome to the Planning Commission's regular meeting for December 16th, 2024. We will move to roll call. Commissioner Rasmussen.
Commissioner Bott,
Here.
Commissioner Britton,
Here.
Commissioner Fisher,
Here.
Chair Frazier,
Here.
Commissioner Knable, absent, Commissioner Rasmussen here, Commissioner Stevens.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3 is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
A motion to approve from Commissioner Fisher. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Stevens. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries 6-0. Item 4 on the agenda is open forum. This is a chance for anyone who's in the audience tonight to speak on something that is not on tonight's agenda. So if there's something that you'd like to bring to our attention that is not on the agenda tonight, this is your opportunity. This time I will open forum. Seeing none, I will close open forum. Item 5 is Chair's explanation of the hearing process. The Planning Commission is a volunteer advisory group to the City Council. One of the Commission's functions is to hold public hearings and make recommendations on land use and zoning matters. The purpose of these public hearings is to provide an opportunity for each applicant and citizens to present information, ask questions, and express opinions. Since these proceedings are televised and recorded for the public record, anyone wishing to speak must step up to the podium and give their name and address before addressing the Commission. Staff reports are prepared and provided to the applicant and Planning Commission in advance of the meeting. The first step in the hearing will be for staff to present a summary of the report. The applicant will then have an opportunity to briefly explain the proposal and provide additional information or comments. Anyone wanting to speak in favor or against the proposal will then be heard. Upon completion of the testimony, the hearing will be closed to public comment. The Planning Commission will then discuss and act on the matter. 2 complete agenda packets are available for viewing on the back table. Please do not remove these items. The City Council will act on these items at their meeting on Wednesday, January 8th, 2025, which starts at 7 p.m. With that, we'll move on to item 6. 6A is the Brockman ICUP extension, case ICUP 2024-025 with Ryan Lee Rooney presenting.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. Happy holidays to everyone. Before you is an application for an interim conditional use permit for the property listed on the screen. The subject site is located on 7.3 acres just south of 100th Street and north of 110th Street, directly across from the new Public Works building and low-zone water treatment plant. So the property is currently zoned R3 single-family residential. It is guided as low-density residential in the 2040 comprehensive plan. The site currently contains a principal structure, a front parking area, as well as a rear exterior storage area, which you can see here. The current owner and tenant is Brockman Land LLC. They store roughly 150 units in the rear storage area. The use is minimal to the surrounding neighborhood, with about 10 to 15 trucks moving on and off the site each week. So I want to talk also a little bit about some of the prior approvals. So before the 2015 ICUP, there had been a number of CUP approvals on the parcel. However, for the sake of this presentation and also for the application, I just want to focus on the 2015 ICUP resolution as well as the 2021 CUP application. So back in 2015, an ICUP was granted for the subject site, which allowed for the exterior storage of mobile office trailers. That ICUP revoked all prior approvals on the site with the exception of the use for the existing principal structure at the front here. That is set to expire this coming August, so August of 2025. Then, in 2021, the previous tenant had applied for a CUP to allow for the storage of semi-truck trailers. From a zoning perspective, mobile office trailers and semi-truck trailers are visually very similar, therefore we treat them almost the same in the code. However, the proposal for the CUP would have provided permanent land use assurance with the property, rather than an ICUP, which provides a set amount of time for that conditional use. Thus, the application was denied at the April 2021 City Council meeting, citing the CUP would impede on the normal and orderly development of the area. So, considering the extension of the ICUP does not enable long-term survival of the use, the proposal is to continue the existing site operations until such time that any adjacent property proposes a use that's consistent with the zoning code and land use standards. The long-term plan is still to support the redevelopment of residential properties in the area when the subject property and surrounding properties are willing and ready for development at that time. Before you is the recommendation. Staff is here to answer any questions. A representative on behalf of the applicant is also here for any site operation questions you may have.
All right, thank you. Any questions for staff? I guess I have a question for you, Riley. The last ICUP then was a 10-year grant.
Correct.
Is there a reason why this one is not a term limited and rather is just based on whenever development happens on a different plot?
Right. We wanted to just ensure that at that time it does expire, it makes sense to do so. Therefore, if we were to set another 10-year period, let's say those properties aren't ready at that time either, then we'd kind of be going through the work all over again. Not necessarily that that's bad, but the idea is that once those properties are ready, it's good to go.
Okay.
I don't know if Emily has anything to add off of that.
So I guess my thought and my concern in going over the packet is a grant of an ICUP with an indeterminate time period, kind of defeating the purpose of an ICUP because it's supposed to be a time-limited, very limited ability to use the property that we should be able to review fairly often. But does it also then make it more difficult for the surrounding properties to develop because this use is ongoing?
Sure. I don't know if Emily wants to touch on that a little more because she has some background, I think.
Sure. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Mr. Chair, you can certainly add a condition that does include a sunset date. Perhaps it's 10 years again, and we can revisit it in front of Planning Commission, City Council. However, leaving it at such time the area redevelops, it helps it kind of all redevelop together, for lack of a better way to put it. So we can certainly add a sunset date as opposed to leaving it open-ended. It's up to you as the Planning Commission.
Okay, I just didn't know if there were thoughts on if my concern is well-founded or if staff said, no, we thought about that and we're not concerned about it, so. All right. Commissioner Britton.
I remembered. So if I remember correctly, a time for termination is normal, but is it also just a normal implementation of the ICUP to have a triggering condition, such as when the land develops? And is that typically the two things, or are there more options?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, an ICUP is intended to be limited to whether it's a time frame, whether it's a triggering event, whatever that might look like. To Riley's point in her presentation, a conditional use permit runs with the land, and we have no ability to kind of revoke that, right? So that interim conditional use permit allows us to put that condition on there for it to end at such time we see the area start to redevelop.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Stevens.
What's the definition of the other properties being ready to develop? Because as I understand, people can be ready to develop and things can come and go and it can go on forever. So how are you navigating the concrete when are they ready to develop? What does that mean?
That's a good question. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, our definition would essentially be at such time that any of those properties were to sell and be sold to a developer to then in turn create residential development. That would trigger that finalization of the interim conditional use permit, should you approve that this evening and it be approved by city council as well.
So it's the sale
It's the sale.
or putting it up for sale? Like, is there a specific?
That, the specific is probably it.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, ultimately, we want the trigger to be for sale or planning application, which would align those properties with our current land use, guided land use, right? So residential, R3 residential. So at such time we receive a planning application for that area to redevelop in that manner
That's the
would be the trigger.
Okay, thank you.
And Emily or Riley, maybe, so the language in recommendation number 5 or condition number 5 in the recommendation talks about surrounding use terminating and then the parcel being proposed to be in compliance with the legal conformity. So that's the actual legal language that would go in, but planning staff would interpret that as someone has put the property up for sale to a development or it's actually been sold to a developer.
That is correct.
Okay.
I have a question to piggyback on
Commissioner
that.
Fisher.
So once an adjacent property does sell, what kind of notice do you have to give the owner of this property we're talking about? Say, hey, we're done. Your ICUP is gone. I mean, is there some sort of like, do they have a year to,
That,
I don't know, I guess I feel like, okay, so something adjacent goes, then what? Oh, 90 days, I missed that, thank you. So 90 days?
Yes.
And the owner is okay with that?
yes.
Sorry, I don't know how I missed that.
That's,
I'll just turn off my mic.
no, it's a good question to clarify, not to worry.
I don't normally interject, but I've got one quick question regarding the 2050 comprehensive plan that will be, that we're going to start working on here. So if the land use in the comprehensive plan changes when we adopt the 2050 comprehensive plan, how does that affect the landowner's, approval? So say we were, say the planning commission were to change the guided land use in the comprehensive plan as a whole, how would this apply to the updated land use guidance?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Councilmember Kambata, we would need to revisit. I don't anticipate the 2050 will adjust the land use guidance for this particular area. Recognizing, it certainly could. We would have to revisit what that redevelopment looks like.
Commissioner Bott.
I have two questions. Excuse me. What's on the north side of this site? What's that currently?
The other side, or just either north and south?
Just north of this property.
So just south is the junkyard, and then north, I believe, is Rumka Excavating. Yeah, so it's
So-
an excavating company currently.
Okay. So when we say adjacent property, does it have to be those two properties or it can be across the street too?
I guess this is residential already, so here, and then the property across the street has already been developed. This is our public works building, and then the low zone water treatment plant is down here. So it'd just be these adjacent properties to the north and south.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Britton.
So how would that happen if you had to revisit it with the underlying zoning changing? What's the process versus maybe changing some of this terminology to somehow reference the master plan, the comprehensive plan?
Sure, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I would anticipate if the underlying land use were to adjust, it would adjust perhaps more to an industrial use, right? Just using my planning brain and thinking, okay, we've got the business park, that would only be the likely other option. And if that is the case, the use then actually more aligns with an industrial district type use. Therefore, use would continue on as is, right? There wouldn't necessarily need to be that trigger to adjust.
Okay.
Emily, I would just, this, again, we're kind of going down the rabbit hole here, but this is probably a little speculative. You said highly unlikely it would change more towards an industrial. I think I would agree with that probably just because there are residential nearby, and I know there's you guys as planners don't like putting industrial next to residential, and I think there's also a higher vote that council has to meet in order to change a property from residential to industrial. So unlikely to say that this would change that far in the 2025 or the 2050 comprehensive plan.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, it's certainly that it could. But again, from a planning perspective, we do like to try and have a little bit of those buffers in between kind of those longstanding residential uses and new development.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for staff? Okay, thank you. Oh, actually, I will ask one more question. If I was gonna push you and say, I really want a year on here instead of a other triggering condition, would staff recommend another 10-year period?
I would say 10 years is, I think, more than sufficient. If you wanted to put a timeline on it, that was something that we would add to the end of the recommendation to bring forward to city council.
All right.
If that's something you're interested in. Yep.
Thank you. Commissioner Britton?
If that were something that were desirable by the group, would it be possible to have whichever happens first, where if the residential development happens, boom, you're done, or in 10 years, we're going to revisit it and we can see what's changed? Okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, your motion this evening can certainly include an amendment to that condition to do whichever happens first.
Okay.
Any further questions for staff? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, if the applicant would like to approach and add anything additional? And sir, if you could give us your name and address
My
as well.
name is Jim Brockman from Brockman Land. And no, I really don't have anything more to add. I think what she said was what we were looking for. Just a way to stay in there. It doesn't make sense for us to sell one small area. But when everybody else develops, we're more than willing. We know how that works, so we're willing to move on then.
Okay.
And a 10-year extension would be sufficient. So,
Okay.
thank
you.
you for your time.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you very much for being here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, at this time, we will open public hearing on the application. Seeing no one else in the audience besides those who've already spoken, we will close public hearing on the application. Further discussion by commission. Commissioner Rasmussen.
I think I agree with your timeline. The 10-year sunset period, it just seems like it gives it a definite end. If this is going to develop, we're sure the north and south will develop with it probably as one. So I'm pretty comfortable with how it's written with the sale of the property, or 10 years, whichever comes first. I like that.
Yeah, and that was kind of my thought coming in, so I'm glad Commissioner Britton asked that question just to be definite that we could do that. But I think it's worthwhile being able to come back and review this in a time period certain if it does continue to exist, but then also give us the out to end it early if those properties start to develop and it makes sense to be a residential area instead of us having to stay to the 10 years. So I think the suggestion that we do either a development or a 10-year period, whichever occurs first, I think is something that should be appropriate here. Any further comments, discussion? Okay, seeing no further, I would look for a motion then.
I will move to approve, subject to the conditions stipulated in the staff report with the addition of the 10-year limit for this to expire, and it can be revisited at that point if it still exists in this state.
Okay, so I have a motion to approve, subject to the conditions recommended by staff, with the addition that the ICUP will either terminate at the 10-year mark or when the adjacent properties develop, whichever occurs first, correct?
Correct.
Any second on that motion?
I'll second that.
Second from Commissioner Fisher. Do I have any further discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Or opposed, say no. Motion carries 6-0. Item 7 tonight is approval of the minutes. Unless there are any additions or corrections, I'd look for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve the November 25th, 2024 minutes. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second from Commissioner Bott. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries 6-0. 8 is reports. 8A is recap of December city council meetings with Emily Schmitz presenting.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, given our early meeting this month, we've only got one meeting to recap, and that is December 4th. However, it was a heavy agenda. A couple items. The council did approve the 2025 through 2029 capital improvement plan, the CIP, that was before you a couple of months ago. They also approved the cannabis zoning ordinance, that was again before you a couple of months ago. So that has been approved and codified. The Cottage Grove Logistics Park, or North Point Development, that was before you for a zoning amendment and a CUP. That was approved at that December 4th meeting. And then finally, you recall the Park High project that the school district is working on for that cafeteria addition on the backside of the building. The council did approve that at their December 4th meeting as well. So with that, I will pass over to Councilmember Kambata this evening.
Thank you. Well, this will be my last meeting as council member liaison to the Planning Commission. So I want to take this opportunity to, again, share my appreciation with all of you for the time that you devote to this. I know it's not easy work, and especially when we have big, thick packets, it's sometimes hard to see the value in what you do, but especially coming from the Planning Commission and being on council, the work that you guys do is invaluable to the city. So thank you. And I wish we had more short meetings like this. I'll be continuing on in some form or capacity with the city, but not on city council, starting in January. So hope to see you guys around, and I'll make myself available for any questions if you have any questions for me.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Councilmember Kamada? Tony, I'll return the thanks to you. I know we started together on Planning Commission, and I know you always worked very hard in this position, in this role, just as a member and then as chair, and then moving up to city council. I know you've always had the city in mind and doing what's best, so thank you for all of your work for the city as well.
Thank you.
8B is response to Planning Commission inquiries. I think we had one at the last meeting that we had answered at the meeting, so no other responses. Planning Commission requests then, 8C. Any requests for staff? Emily, I just have one. So the preserve, prosper, play, I don't know if I put those in the right order, but that plan, obviously, that was not agreed to by voters in the November meeting. I thought Zach, when he did the presentation to us, said that the capital improvement plan may change depending on the results of that referendum. Is that something that we're gonna see within the next couple months, an amendment to that, or do you know a timeline?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I anticipate early in the year in 2025, we'll revisit what that CIP looks like and do those funding opportunities change, obviously, with that preserve, play, prosper not passing in that referendum.
Okay, thank you. Any further inquiries or requests? Seeing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn from Commissioner Rasmussen. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Stevens. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries 6-0. We are adjourned.